Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Friday. Happy Future Friday. For all of you that are joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those that are coming back, we have so many people that have joined us month after month as we've gone through this series. And so I want to welcome all of you back and thank you for joining us again. We love having the repeat attendance. Our topic for Future Fridays today is cities as opportunities for affordable living. I'm James Ball. I'm the director of Future Cities. This topic is so near and dear to my heart. I started my career 18 years ago working on affordable housing with Habitat for Humanity. So I'm so grateful to be here to talk about this topic. It's so, so important as we will be all learning together. Future Fridays is a part of the Future Cities initiative here at the National Building Museum. We cannot do that work without the support of our sponsors. So I have to take a moment to say thank you to AARP, Enterprise and Wells Fargo, Wayne and Ursula Quinn, Rooted Communities, National League of Cities, and KPF. If you've been joining us month after month, you know that that list keeps getting longer, and we're so excited and grateful just to see the momentum growing around this optimistic story around the future of cities. It's so important to us as we're doing this work that all of you have a chance to share your stories as a part of it. So you will see that you've been invited to use Slido for this. My colleague is on the line here in the chat to help you. If you need help accessing that, feel free to ask. And please go in now. As you will see when you go into that section, there's a Q&A area. We'd like to use that right now for you all to get a chance to introduce yourselves, perhaps the organization you're with, where you're joining us from today, and you're even welcome to reply to somebody else's introduction if you'd like to get to know them or exchange information. Please feel free to go ahead into Slido there and start using that where it says type your question to introduce yourself. And while you all are introducing yourselves, I will take the opportunity to introduce our speakers. After that, we're going to get into a dose of optimism to kick ourselves off. And then we have plenty of time for questions from all of you and our ideas cast, which is where you all get to share your stories and thoughts about what we're doing. So I will kick off the introductions here. I'm going to start with Will Johnston. Will Johnston is the executive director of the Micro Life Institute. He is a thought leader and an innovator in the micro living world. So, over the past 11 years, his organization has enabled policy changes and brought acceptance of microstructures into the Southeast through events and projects and advocacy. Will, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled and looking forward to hearing your dose of optimism in a moment.
Glad to be here.
We also have Baba Halm, who is the interim co-president of Solutions Division and senior vice president of programs for Enterprise Community Partners, where she leads continued expansion of the Solutions Division, which oversees programmatic growth, prioritization, partner relations, stakeholder collaboration, and state and local policy advocacy across U.S. regions. Baba, thank you also for joining us. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And finally, we have Brandon Kers is the partner and chief investment officer at Jonathan Rose Companies. He's responsible for analyzing and executing property and portfolio investments. Prior to joining Jonathan Rose, Kers worked as an associate at Summit Partners, where he sourced and analyzed investments in the technology sector. Thank you, Brandon, and happy to have you as well.
Thank you.
So without further ado, again, I'd like to continue just to solicit and welcome everybody to get used to participating. It's so great to see everybody also introducing themselves in the chat. Looks like we have a strong group from around the DC metro area, also people coming in from Florida, Massachusetts, and beyond. So wonderful to have such a wonderful diversity here. Let's dive straight into our content. We love kicking this off with this dose of optimism because it sets the orientation to the exciting work that we all are doing together. So with that, I will stop sharing screen and I will hand this over to Will for our brief dose of optimism.
All right. So thanks, James. Again, everyone, I'm Will Johnston. I'm the executive director of the Microlife Institute down in Atlanta, Georgia. So a dose of housing optimism. Again, where I've been doing this work for the past 11 years, and we started off really talking about policy, really starting like, why did we create the rules the way we did to deliver the products and how we interact with them now? And so, Microlife Institute, I like to say, and I'm stealing this from a friend of mine, Ross Chapin, we like to reweave that social fabric back together. We want to make sure people understand how we can build a little bit better, add a little bit density, and create opportunities for us to organically connect as humans again. So about us, just quick, and then I'm going to jump into more of the overall arching topic. We are a not-for-profit developer down in Atlanta, Georgia. We build stronger communities through housing development projects and educational programming. I love a good housing summit. I love being able to take the topic of housing and create opportunities that make people feel a little bit more comfortable, bring down the fear and bring up the hope, if you will, and that we're able to really create better opportunities by coming together as a community and driving change through better walkability, connectivity, and better housing products. We do strategic consulting, housing development, research advocacy. I just said that. We believe in that housing choice. The dominant species has been single family. And down in Atlanta, 65% of Atlanta is single family. We're almost 7 million person metro area, but yet we still strongly hold on to our grasp of single family. But yet we need more housing typologies. We need the ability to say, hey, you know what? In this stage of life, I just need a little accessory dwelling unit in the back of my friend's house to allow me to get back on my feet, or just downsize my way to happiness and just enjoy the fact that I can go on vacations a lot more. So we love the idea of, really promoting the idea of better policy, better projects, and I love the term pilot projects because it says, hey, let's just squeak one in and be able to say this worked, the world didn't blow up, nothing ended. How about we do it again? How about we actually create policy around this pilot project that allows us to actually further enhance our housing typologies in our cities? So basically better density at work. You see a lot of what you see in front of you, the left versus the right, meaning like that one large acre on one house on 1 acre versus let's talk about putting a couple more on. The fact that we would be able to subsidize through density, meaning we could create more attainable prices. And that's what we're constantly talking about municipalities and cities with, and I know we've got representatives in Massachusetts and all across the United States. You were probably like, well, no, duh, Will. But I feel like sometimes I'm a broken record. Like, have you thought about allowing for a duplex? Because sometimes some people just aren't ready to give in to the idea of having 2 units per lot versus one. And so what I love to do is get people laughing. I love the idea of creating ways for people to engage with housing ideas and really being able to look at this idea of saying, hey, you want that new coffee shop? You want that new restaurant? You want downtown revitalization? Well, people need to walk to it. People actually need to be able to be around it to support it. And I think a lot of people don't realize they need to hear that again and again. It's economics. It's the idea of like, you say you want this new coffee shop, but you need at least X amount more homes nearby so it actually will survive. So our work, I'm standing in the red house right now. So, I believe in better density. We built an 8 unit cottage court development in Clarkston, Georgia on 0.57 acres. We received a Jack Kemp Award for Excellence in Affordable Housing in 2022, as well as a Regional Commission Award. And all I did was put 8 small homes on a half acre. But some people think I moved mountains. And honestly, it was an uphill battle. But it's the idea of bringing a new idea to municipality and a municipality actually embracing it and allowing us to move further. And that's where the beauty of this optimism is, because so many municipalities they know what they need to do. You know that they know, but they're so afraid to take that step. And maybe afraid is not the right word, but they're just trying to find that right moment, that right person, that right group to take their idea and take a step forward with it. And so that's where I feel like I come in. I love the idea of just saying, you know what, that's a really good idea. How about we do your idea? And people know they need density. People know they need different housing types, but it's that first step. And so it's getting them out of their their comfort zone and holding their hand really and saying, let's do this together. Um, we love those design features. So again, how else can we make sure affordability is, for all? And it's that central green space, clustered parking, balanced public and private realm, and flexible amenities. Again, shared space. Sharing is caring. And the idea of for us, you really using that missing middle housing spectrum, figuring out what parcels are in already high amenity areas like a downtown, a park, playground, and being able to design those specific products that match that area, blend in with the neighborhood. I always love to say housing in its natural habitat, where you've got a fourplex next to some single family, next to some townhomes. You literally need all types on one street to create that opportunity of affordability. And so the work, housing assessments, like how can we help talk to our awesome leaders in municipalities? They just need a little bit of guidance, or they just need a couple more ideas that gets their ideas going. Obviously, we know and love the idea of what zoning reform could do. It's kind of one of my favorite things to say is, have you ever thought about getting out of your own way? I think a lot of people don't realize, like, they literally just can say yes, bong, we want housing, we're going to go do it. And I do think we all know fear is real. NIMBYism is real. I wrote a kid's book, sorry, I'm in blurred, but it's NIMBY the Clown. NIMBY the Clown saves his town. It's the idea of like, we can all be NIMBYs, but we all need to transition into the idea of like, you know what? We need to learn, we need to educate ourselves, and we need to be a part of the community that allows us to actually see the economic revitalization as well as the support we all need. Setting an example, I love a good concept design, project financing, and project development. How's it going to work? And that's where we all in this built environment come in. We put the path forward. Obviously, it's going to ebb and flow, it's going to change, but being able to have those amazing conversations with municipalities and giving them the guidance, the support, and frankly, the cheer squad. You need to be a cheerleader. You need to be their support. You need to be their resource. So they are feeling supported, excited, and ready to take on a housing challenge. And I wanted to kind of give you a case study, the one that we're actually working with and working with a city. This city is so ready for housing that so they're down near Savannah, Georgia, Toombs County, and we did a housing assessment study in 2022. We kept that relationship going, and what was great was the city manager said they're seeing revitalization. They need everything from workforce as well as executive housing. What could microlife bring? And so what they brought to the table is they have this 0.81 acre of an old auditorium that's been blighted for over 40 years. And so we said, perfect. How can we support you to build housing there? And vice versa. Because again, how can we create attainable prices? How can we make the city see that this is an investment into their future citizens as well as current citizens, and being able to really drive a little bit of density so it could start supporting that revitalization to downtown. And so we came up with just this simple site plan, that we've been shopping to different businesses throughout Toombs County, and it's a 10-unit cottage court that has everything from basically 2 bedroom, 1 bath. Think of it a universal design. Think of it that downsize your way to happiness for seniors as well as retirees that are just ready to sell off their 2,400 to 3,000 square foot house and be able to buy something and be able to use some of that money that they make from their home sale into something smaller. And then you've got a 2-2 or a 2-2.5, which could be either a single person roommate or couple just starting out or a small family. And then you've got a 3 bedroom, 2 bath. But again, a nice spectrum of different size housing that the city really was excited and embraced. And so here's just a quick little rendering of what we brought. And like I said, right now, we're looking to make this come alive with a little bit of subsidy because also, you've got to meet them halfway. And we want to find the ability to give them the opportunity to be able to bring what they want to. Like I said, they're going to, and I'll go through this quickly and then I'll be done, I swear, James, that they're bringing their investment to the table. We're bringing our ideas and energy and excitement as well as support. And we are forming an amazing team to be able to make this come to fruition. Just some more renderings, but I did want to go over this. So like, if you look at the city provided contributions, they're going to demolish they're going to rezone and replat, and they're going to waive utility tap and permit fees. That's huge, as well as contributing towards infrastructure costs in the above pro forma. Again, this is just a quick and dirty pro forma, but the fact that the city is willing, to do this. And I always keep saying, like, who has the power? You have the power. And they do. And we are so excited to be able to give them the opportunity to bring their investment into this project, as well as they'll be able to make it back. And I forget what years, in 5 years, in 5 to 6 years, they'll be able to pay off their investment in this project. So it's this idea of using missing middle, creating that pilot project, giving the energy and support that they need, and then being able to help drive it home. And obviously, as a not-for-profit developer, I'm all about the ideas. And don't get me wrong, we are getting paid to do this, but we're able to see the vision and be able to reach out to contacts of be able to find either down payment assistance, subsidy, and create this overarching program. Depends on the product, but be able to really support the city and find housing for citizens that are ready to help start the revitalization of downtown. And these are just some of the models that I wanted to show. But again, in the end, Microlife Institute is all about reweaving that social fabric. How do we use finding the better housing typology? And we love working with that municipality that really supports their vision that they already have. And if I have some leadership that's on this right now, like, what you need to do. And I love that. And I think everyone that's ready on this call is here to support you and be able to take you to the next level. So that's my dose of optimism, is that we've got it. That we're able to help support municipalities. We're able to help support cities through ideas, through resources, as well as coming up with a better idea or a better project, or really supporting the project that they already came up with, and seeing it to fruition, because it might take a little longer, but the mission's there, the love's there, and the ability to create affordability is definitely there. So I'll stop there.
Well, that was fantastic. When we first connected, you bring so much energy to this work, and
I jumped through that. Yeah, I literally just jumped through. So,
but what it brings up for me is that I think we're going to get into all the nuances of this, the different levers and the things to do. But some of it is just having a champion, right? Some of it is
yes,
just
that's
somebody that
huge.
shows the
Having a
demand,
housing
shows the
champion.
passion. Yeah, I love that. So thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing your success. So I want to welcome Brandon to also come on to video here. Again, folks, we'll be using Slido for you all to be able to ask your questions for Will. I will have the other panelists there so they can join the conversation before we head into that more of an ideas cast. But while people are typing their own questions into Slido, Will, I'd love to, again, see how you are using this energy you bring to this to build that coalition of the willing, right? My sense is you're working directly with municipalities, but you're also working with the community, or how are you gaining that kind of the necessary amount of pressure, if that's a kind of reasonable term to use, that you are moving these projects forward. The NIMBY the Clown book for me is just such a fantastic example of how you're bringing creativity to this. So I wonder if you want to speak to other ways
So,
you bring that
what
together.
might not shock you, James, is that I was a theater major. So again, yeah, thank you, Baba. Like I have no idea how I became a developer, but you know what? Everyone should take improv classes because it makes you quick on your feet and you should be able to respond. And my mantra is laugh at me while I'm talking to you, because if you make it so serious and like drab and boring and just downward spiral, people are not going to care. But if I can get them laughing, if I can get them feeling at ease, then they're willing to actually hear what I have to say. And that is, we need housing. Because a lot of people are fingers in their ears and they're like, la, 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 I got in, I shut the gate, no one else is here.
Right.
But the fact that I do, funny enough, I actually read NIMBY the Clown Saves His Town to commissioners, and like I'll go to, a policy thing. I'm like, let me read you a story. But I mean, I like to call it, or I like a quick way to describe it is the Grinch that stole Christmas, but for zoning. He hated an idea, his heart grew, and now he's like, oh, that's a better idea. And that's
Right,
exactly what we need to do with housing. Like the fact that
right,
you could meet your future partner, future wife, future
right.
dog sitter, future babysitter, like whatever. The fact that we need to create these housing typologies, it just blows my mind that we as a culture are so afraid to get to know one another.
Yeah.
And the way I believe we need to one of our future questions, like we need to get back to actually knowing each other as humans, not
Mm.
as a neighbor. Like we actually need to be in that build in
Yeah.
a way that actually makes us connect daily
Yeah.
versus garage facing, pull in, private backyard. I'll text you if I,
Sure.
need a cup of sugar.
Yeah, the idea of community there. I like I do think it's an important thing to double click on around the narrative we bring to this, because I think sometimes this is viewed as almost a wonky conversation that is policy centric, that's about governance, and it is. But when we speak towards a general population, for them to be able to come to this topic of housing and not feel that that's a threat to them, that they not feel that that's going to lower the value or quality of their neighborhoods, of their living, of their quality of life, and to be able to see this topic of housing as something more human, which I think is part of the story that you're bringing to this, right? That
And
this is
and I think
touching.
also too, we're so obsessed with what success looks like that we don't realize like my house is 492 square feet. That's it. I have an amazing life in 492 square feet. I mean, obviously, one person, three dogs, but still, the fact that we don't understand what quality of life we could have in a smaller square footprint.
Yeah.
We think 2,400 square feet is success. Yet, even going 1,400, even going 900 in a well-designed space, you can thrive big.
Yeah. A couple questions in from the chat for Will, and then we'll be moving into a more of a panel conversation. But just a couple questions, I think, more on the logistics, Will, of like how long did it take? There's a question of how long did entitlements take before you broke ground. Do you want to just briefly give us a little bit of the time scale for that success story you shared?
So what was great about the Cottagers on Vaughn is that it found us. So we were doing another project in another part of Atlanta, and a mayor of Clarkston, then mayor Ted Terry, was just like, "Hey, I want that. I want that here." And
Mm,
so he came to us. We helped rewrite the Cottage Court ordinance to allow a more better housing typology mix footprint, and it took 6 to 9 months. Again, community engagement, all that stuff. It passed. And then what was crazy was at that moment, I was just policy and advocacy. That's
mm,
all my not for profit was. I was just like, let's talk about it. And then I was realizing no one is doing what I'm talking about. So the mayor then just said, "Hey, how about you build what we just passed?" And we're like, "Okay, I haven't done this before." But luckily, one of my previous business partners, she was in cell tower development, found this awesome end unit. We were able to go through, and obviously, number one rule, everyone, don't build during a pandemic. Am I right? You just don't know what's going to happen there. So what I thought was going to take a year to build 8 houses took two, but that was due to material costs, labor, in and out of COVID. But all in all, I think if it was done today with no issues, I mean issues in development, I would say it would take a year and a half to 2 years from start to finish, with going after the permits and stuff like that.
fantastic. Well, look, I want to bring in the voice of Baba and
Yes.
Brandon to this conversation. And so I'm going to segue us over to our ideas cast. Again, for those of you that this is the first time joining, the idea is really to give you all an opportunity to share your ideas and thoughts on these questions as we move through it. So those questions will show up on my background screen here. I'll have my colleague clear the chat so that you all can be typing into Slido as we go into a discussion of this. And we'd like to kick it off really nice and easy. And I think this is one of these questions that it seems like so simple. What makes living affordable? And yet I think there's a lot more nuance there than maybe people even appreciate. So, Baba, I'm wondering if I can actually start with you as people are sharing their own ideas on this in the chat of what's the first thing or a couple rapid fire things that come to mind for you when you think about what does affordable living even mean? What makes living affordable?
Yeah, first I want to say I share in Will's enthusiasm and passion for talking about affordable housing. And I want to say I think the cry for affordable housing across the country is very loud and clear, and that we all should be working on how we create more housing typology and more supply and working in community. So, but when we think about affordable housing for us in this space, it's not just about the building and the walls and the size of the units. It's much more than that. It's about how we think about community. It's about how we think about cost. It's about, resilient housing, equitable housing, salient housing. And we know right now, all across the country, folks are cost burden, right? According to the most recent study from the Harvard School, there are over 22.6 million households that are cost burden, right? And that's 200,000 more households than the year before. And what that means is that folks are contributing more than 30% of their income to their housing cost. And that's on top of healthcare, education, transportation, childcare, you name it. That's in addition to everything else before folks. And so when we talk about affordable living, what does that really mean? It really does translate into how you're able to day in and day out meet your daily and your family needs. And so we really do have to think about um, how we build, how we sustain communities, and the idea of knowing your neighbor. I mean, that's important wherever you are, whether you're in a 400 square foot home or you're living in an apartment building, you're living in a duplex, you're out on
Mm.
your own farm, right? So we have to think about housing and affordable living and affordable housing more broadly than we have been.
Yeah, and I love that you've immediately brought us to a bigger scale of this conversation, right? Not just the unit, not just the building, but looking holistically at the community and its qualities. Brandon, how about you? What are kind of the quick things that come to mind for you when we think about how do we define affordable housing?
Yeah, and I always like to start with a disclaimer. We're housers and we're working on one half of the issue, but I like to remind people that housing affordability is fundamentally like rent divided by income, and so the other part of the equation is income. Obviously as housers, we're not helping folks get jobs, but I do think that, you know, what is really important, what that ties to in a lot of the work that we do and where, a lot of the work that Jonathan Rose Companies does focus is not just on the building of affordable housing, but on the preservation of affordable housing. And we specifically focus on affordable housing in high opportunity areas
Mm.
because what makes something affordable? Well, ultimately, if we can create affordable housing, if we can give access to housing in places that have access to better jobs, better schools, I think so much data has shown that the zip code you're born in has so much to do with the outcomes on the rest of your life. And, so while the building we build, the rents that we have, that's what we control. But if we can do that in places that have access to high opportunity, that helps get at the denominator in that equation. That helps get to income
Right.
because we're creating housing where people will have access to opportunity later in their life. And hopefully that's what gives people better incomes too, which leads to more, affording everything that one needs in their life. And
Yeah.
and I think that's part of one of it too. It's like, what are you getting when you pay for housing, right? And there's very literal things, right? In some of our projects, we do energy efficiency because if you pay less for utilities, you are net paying less for housing, right? If we locate a building next to transit and you're paying less for driving or let you don't have to pay for a car or your transit costs are lower, we've made your housing, your total cost of living more affordable. And so I think those are other things that are really important for us is are we, I mean, this gets to Will's point, like, are we creating communities that are net more affordable? And
Yeah.
part of that affordability is, not just literally the dollars that you're paying, but what are you getting for those dollars? What do you have access to? I think we as a country have a history of building affordable housing in places that had, weren't great places to build housing, right? And
Mm.
even now, there are some elements of the tax code that, I think for some well-intentioned, other not well-intentioned reasons, drive towards building affordable housing and inherently affordable places that
Yeah.
that have a tendency to concentrate maybe away from opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think what we try to do is figure out how do we build housing that makes it affordable for people to live in a place where they're going to get not just a place to live, but
Yeah.
an ROI on their living.
Well, and it makes me, there's the real estate line of location, 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 right? And I think a lot of times we talk about sustainability or affordability, and somehow that seems like a contrary idea to location being so critical. But I think you're making the point really well here of like that same question of location is critical to the conversation of affordability and sustainability, although not the topic I list here. Will, before I go to you, I just want to invite people and remind people that we really want to hear from you on these questions. This is your chance to, there's a question that's come up in Slido, but we're actually just using Slido in this case for you to share your thoughts, your ideas, so that I will be bringing those comments that come up in Slido into our chat. So just want to encourage everybody to participate. Will, you got a chance to kick us off here, but is there anything not mentioned yet that is another kind of facet of this holistic view
Well,
of affordable
I
living?
think what I want to say to with Baba and Brandon, like it's a combo platter, like meaning like, all right, we are zooming from across the United States right now. So why aren't cities finding programs to work with large corporations to match them with housing, match them with jobs in their area? Like we can be so inventive in how this all works
Hmm.
as well. I mean, as well as affordability to also, we need to support entrepreneurship. Like so the idea of a path to letting people see that they can be a real play a stake in the community and their city, whether it be a size of 3,000 people or 300 or 3 million or 300 million. I don't know. Like we have the ability to invent and create. And there needs to be another level. Yes, job or a pay raise that needs that really happen because people need to be able to afford, especially where, I think we saw that article recently, like all of the housing stock is going the way of California. And hey, Californians, but like, your housing is expensive. Guess what? Atlanta's is too. Like,
Yeah.
my little 492 square foot is valued at almost $250,000, and that's 492 square feet. So it is location, location, location. But going back to what Baba said is community and sharing. Like we use apps for everything. We use Uber. We thought like if we actually had neighbors that supported us, we could give each other rides. We could make sure that we could cut costs because someone could watch their kids. They're like bringing back the community or it takes a village mentality too could really help someone save a lot of money because their caring is their credit card.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to move on to the next question, but
Yeah.
I have to throw in I see some of that conversation around community in this post-pandemic moment for us as well. So maybe we'll come back to that. But let me again, we're going to clear the Slido. Jay, I see your question there. I'm going to bring that in later, but I want to clear that because we want to now get more into a description of this vision. And I'll say this is for me the joy of being at a museum, which we can do these kind of imagination, visioning exercises. Like how do we show this vision where people will feel inspired to want these places, these urban areas to be more affordable? So, Brandon, maybe I can start with you on this one. Bring this to life for us. What does this look like? You have your own examples to give, but anything kind of to paint the picture.
Yeah, and maybe I spoiled spoiler alert on the last answer. It's like we like to focus on creating communities where we're preserving affordable housing in places that have high access to opportunity. So like what makes a community is that you can get what you need. You can have a job, you can have a school, you can have your amenities nearby. And so I guess there's kind of two ways to think about that. If I'm thinking about my preservation lens, where are we preserving affordable housing? We're trying to buy and work with agencies and the government to preserve affordable housing in the face and wave of gentrification, right? If we can see it coming and we can preserve that affordable housing, then I don't want to, I think gentrification generally has a negative tone, but revitalization has a positive tone, right? And there are, uplift and wins. And so if you can get ahead of that and use that as a tool for good, right? That there are going to be better jobs and better schools, but members of the community that have been there for a long time can continue to live there. I think like that is part of our vision for affordable living, right? And then obviously we go into places and do new construction in places that are long-standing, affordable projects. And maybe this is better with a couple examples. Our company is building the first affordable housing in the West Village in New York in I think 3 decades, right? What an amazing opportunity for people to continue to live in an area where people pay $10,000 a month in rent, right? But if you can live in the West Village and your kids can go to those schools and you can have access to that work, if you can not have to commute an hour and a half into your job, I mean, I think what a rich community that creates there. And also that sort of, I don't want to call the West Village a bubble, but, a little bit burst the bubble of like, and make sure, and New York City is an easy place that diversity is always there, but it's also a very wealthy place, right? And so, I mean, to bring that to an example, maybe a couple other examples across the country of where we've done work. We've done a lot of work on the 14th Street corridor in Washington, D.C., and there have been able to do some interesting things where right? Part of affordability and the attainable side is if you can create some more supply, right? Then hopefully that helps keep rents sort of down. At the same time, there's capital A affordable where you're doing deed restricted or government subsidized. We've been able to take a couple low density buildings on the 14th Street corridor that were historically affordable housing, through HUD. But in the wave of the face of the gentrification kind of coming up 14th Street, we're able to work and take advantage of zoning increases to take what was in one case 48 units, double the affordability to 196, 192. Sorry, no, I can't do math. 92, by selling the other half of the parcel to a market rate developer that then created 300 market rate units, which cross subsidized the affordable units, right? And then we did that strategy again up the street with similar numbers, slightly different mix, right? But we're taking out of date housing stock that's low density in the face of a wave of gentrification, using the upzoning and using some of the proceeds of that to preserve the existing affordability, increase the affordability, but hey, okay, it's fine to create market rate housing too, because that's what makes it possible. And if we increase the total number of units, that's good for everyone. Down in Atlanta, where we'll actually, my desk may be in New York, but I might joke that my mortgage is here in Atlanta. Over in the Edgewood community, right? Another
Yeah.
sort of in the wave of gentrification, sort of between Kirkwood and Edgewood, we did a really big preservation project there. And it was interesting to see that community really be supportive of wanting to make sure that knowing that their own neighborhood was changing, that this community was preserved, but also it had been an underinvested property, a neglected property, and sort of, right, being able to help address some crime issues, being able to address housing quality issues. I think it provided uplift, not just for the residents living there who now get to, as that booming part of Atlanta has better schools, better jobs, like those people get to stay, but it also helps everybody else in that neighborhood. And I think we could probably have a whole different segment on sort of interesting things. And I'm sure you're
Yeah.
familiar with Eric Kronberg, and he's done some interesting missing middle and ADU housing in that neighborhood. And yeah, so I think it takes neighborhood by neighborhood strategies, but fundamentally it's like you need a mix of people and you need access to all the amenities that you need, and you need to be close. That's our vision, right? It's like
Yeah.
ideally you could walk to everything.
Yeah.
Atlanta's different, but we
Yeah,
try.
we are.
Well, I just to synthesize some themes I'm hearing, we're talking about the broader community qualities of this vision we're having. We talked about different typologies that Will was bringing up, right? Different sizes and scales. Brandon, you're bringing up this element of not everything is capital A subsidized affordable housing, right? And any additional housing overall leads to a general affordability improvement to the market, even market rate, right? So overall increasing supply is there. I want to bring in a comment from the audience that mentioned prefab and manufactured housing as part of a vision of the future of affordable living. I wonder if anybody has a take on that as well. When you think of this vision, we're hitting on these different scales, but how are the characteristics or perhaps the process of creating the housing need to change? Will, do you want to start, and then I'll go to Baba on that?
Sure. So be very good with your definitions. So is it manufactured or are you talking modular?
Yeah.
Because manufactured, you're going to get run out of town because that is definitely seen as mobile home park. But if you say modular, but you need to go bring back the education, it is basically stick built in a factory, dropped on site. It's still on a foundation. So again, definitions are key of explaining what type of product is going to happen. Right now, my last Wine About Housing event, we had Lou Oliver, who is really stepping into modular, but the price still. I mean, you think it's going to be this magic box that's only going to cost $50,000 and just drop on. That's not the case. So right now, it's either paying $2 up front or $2 in the back. It hasn't gone up or down, so it does save on time. So like you could be doing your infrastructure, and by the time you're done with your infrastructure, you've got 20 units being brought in, so you're saving 6 months on interest. But again, those 6 months might be totally blown out by bad weather and paying 10,000 a day for a crane to drop a modular. So again, I don't think we're getting close. And you think about icon printing housing. I'm going to stop with this thought that we need to get out of historical concept thoughts of what housing needs to look like. If we want
Mm,
affordability, we should be able looking at the future of what housing will look like, because Icon's printing housing, but yet people are like, well, I don't want to live in something that looks like a beehive. I mean, I would, but again, we need to get to the point where we need to define housing differently and allow people to embrace the innovation that's at our doorstep.
great image.
Yeah, and on that, I think that there's a lot of innovations that are afoot and kind of being tested out. And I think on the question of modular versus manufactured, I think it really depends on where you are.
Right.
Through Enterprise and our Housing Affordability Breakthrough Challenge, we're supporting Dream Build, an organization in Texas that is doing modular and modular home ownership, really trying to get home ownership to serve 20% AMI households. Like that's real innovation, right? Not just building, but the price point, who can afford what you build and where they are. And I think that that's part of what we need to think about, how we build innovatively, cheaper, quicker, in more places, but then who are we serving through what we're able to build. And I think just going back to what Brandon was saying about thinking about the opportunities in cities like New York that are, in some people's mind already built up at capacity. How do we bring on more housing supply? Clearly there's a need in more housing types, and we have to really be creative there about what we're talking about, whether or not modular fits the need and could be an option in a high density city. Or are we talking about ADUs? Are we talking about adaptive reuse? Are we talking about office to residential conversion? Are we talking about underutilized land through institutions like faith-based organizations or universities and all of those other partners that we're thinking about? And if we're talking about economic opportunities, how is housing partnering with those big employers, right? Those hospitals, the big corporations that their workforce is telling them that there's a need for housing. And so thinking about capital, what are those capital resources? Is it just government that's at the table? We need more than government at the table to really meet the housing need, and to produce the units that we see are necessary across the table. So I think we have to think beyond the traditional way of how housing gets built, what type of housing gets built, what materials we use,
Yeah.
what partners we use to really kind of push across, and even in places like Atlanta, because when I'm in Atlanta, Atlanta isn't land constrained, right? So it's not overly built, but there
But
still
yet
is a
we
challenge.
are.
But yet you are, right? So it may be the viewpoint of community. And I love the story. I'm like, look, let's look back. What did our communities look like
Mm,
25 years ago, 50 years ago, even New
yeah.
York City, what did it look like? And where are we going? What is the need? And
Yeah.
and then even thinking about like a high resource, a high opportunity neighborhood, that can be everywhere. We can create that
Mm,
everywhere, right? And so
yeah.
it's linking the sectors, it's linking opportunity, it's linking housing need, and it's not being stuck in where we are today, but what is the
Yeah.
need, and how do we marshal all the resources? How do we marshal all the sectors? How do we marshal to really address that?
This is fantastic. I have to move us along because I want to get deeper into it. But I think, Baba, you really just synthesized that kind of the vision and this whole overall. And again, I'm so grateful to be at a museum to have these conversations because the ability to think creatively, to be open to new ideas, to be inspired by like, yes, the history, like the past doesn't look like today, and the future is not going to look like that either. This is a transformation. It changes over time. That's exciting. That's something that is about the creative process that we co-create our world with. So I love where we're going here. So this next question is really, and I want to bring in some. There are some great comments in the chat here around how do we do some of this overcoming those ideas of that, the future might not look like it does right now. I'm just going to tee up the categories and then we'll go through them. So there's this kind of overcoming the kind of stuck in the past, There's this question of like how do we create the economic environment more, maybe even from a financing lens is being brought up here. And then this question of zoning. So why don't we clear the chat so people can bring in their new ideas? And I'd like to just go back around the horn. And if I could ask you to like, let's go into some of the how. What are some of those the best practices that we can replicate, the work that we can do right now. And maybe we start with the finance piece. Brandon, can I start with you on that? You want to tackle the economics for us?
Uh, yeah. I mean, there's so much to respond to. And then there's so many thoughts that I'm going to try not to respond to in the last discussion about modular and affordable. But I have to, a couple, somebody said something about 461 Dean, walked that building. Very interesting story indeed there. Maybe nearly bankrupted the company that did it in terms of modular, right? And yet the company that did that is a company that had modular nailed down in the 1970s for a city. We own about 8,000 units that originated with Forest City, and they were able to put up high-rise elderly housing, block and plank construction, and they craned in kitchens and bathrooms for, they could build it in 9 months. But it's interesting because they didn't do it in infill sites. They tended to do it in suburban areas where you have laydown yards, and I think that's one of the challenges, right, to prefab and modular is most of those sites that I'm looking at across here in the Old Fourth Ward, not a one of those sites is the same shape. So it's really hard to put units that are the same shape on sites that aren't the same shape. And to get to financing, just a couple other things like that, right? Like I think people talk a lot about zoning, but like the fire department and fire code is
Oh
like the
yeah.
unwritten zoning master in all of this,
Mm,
right? And actually fire marshals, even after you build the building, have input on things about
Project killers.
and I think this is one of the things across the nation is I think if you rewind to 40, 50 years when there was slightly less regulation, you could be more systematized across the country. You could build prefab panels and bathrooms in Ohio and ship them across the country because maybe fire codes and maybe zoning codes weren't so specific.
mm,
I won't say that for sure because I wasn't around, I wasn't doing it, and I haven't analyzed it, but that's my sense.
mm,
And today, every jurisdiction to try to make things safer, to try to make things better and more local, I think it makes it harder to systematize things nationwide.
mm,
And then I have lots of thoughts on mobile homes. My grandparents and most of my extended family all lived in mobile homes before we got them into a community in their elder years and into a building. But so how do you finance all of this? I think all of the different variations locally, for the same reason it makes it hard to systematize what you're building nationally.
mm,
From a constructability standpoint, it also makes it hard from a financing standpoint. So, what do we need to do to realize this thing? To the extent that you can make things work the same in as many different places as possible, it
mm,
makes things easier. So, federal programs are very easy to utilize because they're the same everywhere in the country.
right.
Anywhere it starts to get state specific or local specific, I mean, it's interesting. Real estate's fundamentally local, and we need that community support, that local support more than ever when federal resources are constrained and insufficient to build affordable housing.
Mm,
But at the same time, if it's different in every place, then it limits your ability to scale. It limits your ability to do it faster, right? It is different to do it in Atlanta than it is Decatur than it is, Stone Mountain. It's different to do it in New York than it is Newark. It's different in Alexandria, Virginia than it is Washington, D.C. And so even in a region, it can be hard to scale just because the financing tools aren't available. So I think some things in the affordable housing thing, and someone asked, and I'm trying to tie it back to some questions I saw earlier, 80/20 buildings in New York. Um, where like one tool that I think is just really easy and systematic that jurisdictions can roll out is tax abatements for affordable housing. It's sort of a math problem. If you want a developer to take this much less in rent and you can make up the difference on taxes, it becomes very easy to get market rate developers to do 80/20 buildings in affordable housing. And I think New York City's been very successful in that.
mm,
California has a property tax abatement for affordable housing, and we've been able to take some projects there that were market rate and make them affordable,
mm,
leveraging those tax abatements. And I think programs like that, if you can make it easy to use, if you can make it systemic, that if there's a program that people know how to use, people will figure out how to use it.
mm. That's great. I'm gonna keep us moving because I want to bring in, I'm gonna do a thread here, which is the question came up or the comment from Shira around dealing with the issue of public opinion about this, right? The NIMBYism. So we teed that up earlier. But Brandon, I want to tie it to what you were saying, which is that there's this question of scale, right? And there's like this inherent local quality to this work. And then there's this kind of needing to do these things more impactfully at a broader scale. And I've heard that same conversation happen about that public opinion piece. So often these questions of YIMBY, NIMBY, not backyard, happen at a local scale. And I know there's groups that are trying to start changing that narrative at a national scale, at a much bigger conversation. And it's part of what we're doing here together right now. So, Baba, maybe I can go to you of just like, what are your talking points? How do you do the messaging? How do you help overcome some of that initial resistance that some people have to this conversation?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about scale, everything is not a high rise, right? It could be townhouses, it could be duplexes, it could be the cottage style community that Will showed us
Mhm.
earlier in his rendering. And so that we're not saying every neighborhood needs to look alike. So some of that is the opposition that you hear from NIMBY groups. Like, I don't want Atlanta to be New York City, right? Like
Mhm.
that's what they're saying. Oh, I don't want my community to look like that. But
Mhm.
we're not saying in the quest to increase supply that we all need to be uniform and
Mhm.
what housing options are available and what it looks like. And so hopefully that gets people okay with bringing on more housing types, because we're not saying that it should all look the same or that
Mhm.
it should all be high rise, but we have to recognize that, people have different needs. Your family size grows and there's changes. And what we're talking about today is affordability, what people can afford now, but also into the future. Think about that person aging. Think about that person being born today, that in a couple of years, their household size and their housing needs are going to change. And so, how
Mhm.
do we continue to be adaptive? How do our communities continue to be thriving, interesting, exciting, in places that attract others? And that's the tie in between opportunity, housing types, and a thriving neighborhood that we got to get people to understand. It's not just about what's being built next to them, right? Do you want your community to lose population, lose employment, lose jobs? All of those things are tied in, right? And so if we're not bringing on more housing, if we're not embracing new neighbors, new community, new options, that does could impact the community long terms in terms of
Mhm.
the viability of that neighborhood, that community. And so I think educating people about that linkage and that understanding helps in getting
Yeah.
people comfortable with more housing.
Yeah.
Oh, I just think that is so poignant. Like the shift from somebody saying, we need to talk about housing, and they picture a high rise next to their single family home versus we need to talk about housing, and they connotate having better teachers and having a well-staffed community and resources and vibrancy. And that's just such a different conversation to even get
Yeah.
started.
There's such
Will, go
still
ahead.
such a disconnect. So I offer tours of my home as well as the cottage on Vaughn. So I've had almost 10,000 people, probably 10,000 people now in the past 4 years, come through my house. And so I love it when people look at me dead in the eye and they say, "This would be great for a homeless person." I'm like, "Okay, I see where you're coming from. You think I'm in a small house and it's for people who are doing bad in life." But really, it's that education exposure to different housing typologies, just what Baba said. We need people, but also people define what they live in. And it's like, how dare you build something that I would not want to live in? So
Mhm.
again, this education is huge because people need to see, feel, touch. And my biggest takeaway is like, I don't need you to want to live here. I need you to see the value for others.
Right.
That's the key because I could have an elderly couple doing universal design in 500 square feet, be able to sell their 3,500 square foot house. They've got more money for retirement, more money to travel. Like that, it's that whole concept of downsize your way to happiness, as well as the cycle of housing is broken right now. Just to what Baba said, like we need housing typology that fits where you are in life. And
Yeah.
all the developers want to build right now, like 72% of new builds are the large single family homes that easy to go through zoning. That's where it's at. But yet, what's the average American household size right now? Like 2 point, where are we? Like 2.4, 2.3, somewhere in there.
Three, 2.3. We're less than
We're
2.3.
going down, but also size. I mean, back to like we need to shrink our footprint. Back to what Brandon said. If you are shrinking your footprint, you're already being more sustainable. We did a quick comparison of 800 stick built to a 2,000 stick built. Just in 800 square feet, you are being double efficient because it's less materials to build, less energy to heat and cool. all that other fun stuff. And you don't need the bells and whistles of a LEED certified or Earthcraft home.
I will say if I could jump in on this sort of
Please.
theme of like how do you reach the community and like how do you get buy-in and get support? I think if there's one thing I've learned, if I go in trying to tell a community what they need and why they need it, nobody wants to be taught a class that they didn't sign up for.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I've had to learn the hard way, right? Maybe listen first. You know the answer you're trying to get to, but if you don't help the community feel like they're meeting their needs as well, then you're dead in the water. And also along the way, I think in any negotiation, which I think you should frankly, most times it's a negotiation, like both sides have to feel like they won a little something, that they got a little something. So
Yeah.
I think going into it, like what are you willing to give? And I think to the point though of helping people understand what they're getting out of it, if you go into a community and say, we need to preserve this affordable housing because affordable housing is important for this country, that hasn't generally helped solve any of the opposers' issues in that neighborhood. If you help people understand that their coffee is more because their barista has to drive an hour to get to work, or they can't find childcare because a nanny can't afford to live in that neighborhood, and I'm using some high income tropes, right? But so forgive me. But I think if you can make it real, or we were in a community and we're trying to display density, and I think Baba made this point, not everything's a high rise, right? We're in Athens, Georgia, and we're trying to show pictures of what something can look like. Well, we took pictures from DuPont Circle neighborhood. Like these are what townhouses can look like, right? Like townhouses aren't inherently a bad thing, right? We took photos from Brooklyn that later it's interesting what the community wanted after we showed that when, those are actually really high expectations to live up to. But right, I think it's like making it real for people. Like who's going to live here? What are we trying to serve? What are we trying to accomplish? How is this helpful for everybody? And understanding, trying to seed questions that help people give you something, give them a problem. If you can figure out the problem they're trying to solve and a way that you're aligned with that, then I think you can get a success.
This is fantastic. The time always goes by extremely quickly on these. There's so much to cover. There's so much expertise you all brought to this. I want to start by thanking everybody that participated in Slido. Thank you to our speakers for sharing all of your expertise and story. I have to say, part of the beauty of the Future Friday series is that this is an ongoing exploration around cities. And I will tell you what, the number one theme, conversation, view that we keep coming back to is community. And it's amazing to see how that has shown up in conversations around economy and innovation. And coming up next month, which is my part of my segue here, is that Future Friday continues. This is actually the fourth out of five total for this year. We will pick this back up after that. But the conversation coming up on August 1st is about the nexus of mobility. So we will continue to explore cities in that regard. Again, the Future Cities Initiative is the umbrella initiative that Future Fridays occurs under. I welcome you all to reach out to myself or my colleague Rachel if you'd like to learn more or get more involved with that. This is a collective reimagining. And if I could, with our last minute, I know we're online, but please join me in a final virtual round of applause and thank you to all of our panelists, our experts for sharing their insights, for being a part of this conversation, and for the work that you all are doing every day on this critical topic. Your organizations are truly leading this, and we're so grateful. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.